blessings.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another installment of The Other Leg, Andy's Music Vault. My name is Andy Nicholes, and this is my other channel where I do everything outside of Paul and the Beatles. As you've known, if you're a subscriber to this channel, you're likely a subscriber of Two Legs, so you know that everything that I like to do outside of that world, whether it's progressive rock, Bob Dylan, Elton John, you name it, goes under this umbrella. And I've had a lot of good guests on this channel, but I'm really excited today to present a really special guest on this episode, a family member. And, tonight I have my Uncle Scott Nicholes, as a guest on this channel, and a huge inspiration for me musically, which we're going to get to. I've had other family members on too. I had my dad on Two Legs a year ago, and he talked about Ram. So it's nice to kind of keep it in the family. Although we're not doing Beatles stuff this time, we're taking a little bit of a dive. So before we dive into our topic, let me just welcome my Uncle Scott to Andy's Music Vault. What's up, Unc?
What's up, Andy? Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for agreeing to come on to it. This sideshow thing is nice to do other stuff, and 50 years ago, yeah, a lot of great music came out in the year 1973. Boy, let me tell you, Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, you name it, all great stuff. An album we're going to talk about today, Band on the Run, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, all great albums. Zeppelin, Houses of the Holy, also in 73. Lots of great music, all through in 73. Tales from Topographic Oceans by Yes, also 73.
No,
Yeah, and but how are you doing? How's everything going?
good. Okay.
Good. Well, there's a lot of history behind what we're going to be talking about today, and today we're going to be focusing on the Who's 1973 double LP classic Quadrophenia, which is also 50 years old this year. It was released in November of 73. And I mean, we're a little early, but who cares? We're gonna celebrate it anyway because it's such a classic, and you and I have such a history with this music and this album, going back decades, road trips, long nights, listening to it, dissecting it, and you already knew it for 20 years before I knew it. So,
Yeah,
um,
almost.
in a related topic of a little fortuitous luck on the topic that we're doing today, The Who announced today that they're doing a super deluxe edition of the album that came before Quadrophenia, which is Who's Next, which is, a lot of people will say, you go back and forth, Who's Next, Quadrophenia, 1A, 1B. I know where your vote stands.
Yeah.
I
So
know
you got Tommy in there too, right?
you got Tommy in there too, and I know where the a vote stands for another relative of ours. He votes for Who's Next every time, but it's pretty cool that today of all days, the Who announced that we're going to get some, and this is like the Quadrophenia Uber Deluxe box set that came out in 2011. Multi volume discs, 5 discs, Townshend's demos. You've heard them all. You've dissected them, and we'll talk about that during the show today. But the Who's Next treatment is going to get the same exact treatment as this, and that is due for a release date of September 15th, which, I'd be lying if I told you I didn't already pre-order it and get it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Quadrophenia got me though.
Well, yeah. Well, let's talk about you. Before your fandom, you are somebody who is a drummer. You don't drum too much anymore, but you were a very, very prolific musician and a drummer first. So tell everybody a bit about, before we even get into Quadrophenia, let me hear a little bit about your background, your influences, musically, and why drumming to begin with.
Well, I'm sure the drumming was there, in me. That was my direction, but it wasn't something thought of. Put it that way. The actually the premise was to get me involved in something as a young man because, as you know, your grandfather, my father, passed away. I was very young, so they needed me to do something. They didn't want to keep me off the streets, so to speak, and not have me get into trouble. So your aunt was in the drum and bugle corps, McFadden Brothers Drum and Bugle Corps. They brought me in, and I started out in the drum section. Started out playing cymbals, marching band cymbals. Then I learned to play a drum, and I progressed, and I actually was good at it. And one thing led to another. I had a hiatus for a few years, and I had an itch. And I got a guy down the block, Louis Locks. I won't use his last name. He had a drum set for sale, $200. $200 back in, how old was I? 1980. I was 16, I believe, and I bought it and I set it up, and it was a sea of drums in the basement. You remember the basement? I don't, but you don't remember all these drums because I eventually scaled it down after I got better.
Right.
But growing up in the house, you have these albums now; they're your possession, but they were mine to listen to.
That's your original copy right up there.
Is it? Well, that was my album, but getting into this music,
right?
Your father, Uncle Eddie, and even Betty Ann, your Aunt Betty Ann, we had albums. We didn't have a lot of albums. Your father bought a stereo. It's a big box, wooden box, just 33, 78, and we had records to listen to. And as far as the Who was concerned, we had Who's Next. We didn't have Quadrophenia.
Right.
So I had Who's Next long before I heard Quadrophenia.
Because you discovered that album later, like years after the album came out.
Got into the Who, Pat Craig, my friend Pat.
Yep.
Mike Borman liked the Who. I mean, you got your friends who liked what. Queen was out, Rush was out, Zeppelin.
Yes.
Who's favorite brand? I was into Yes already. And Pat, I'm going to say Pat, but I'm sure other influences directed me. Said, did you listen to this one? I mean, that Beady Beady Big and Bouncy, because it had all the songs on it. I don't even know half of those albums you started getting into. You started buying everything, like whatever the ones, the early records.
The pre-Tommy stuff.
Yeah, the Who's records are kind of sparse in the beginning with like major songs. You had onesies, twosies. I think Beady Big and Bouncy was kind of like a greatest hits, right?
It got that whole pre-Tommy era under one album of hits. And that's something I learned throughout my fandom was the pre-Tommy Who, and there's a lot of fans of the pre-Tommy Who, the mod Who, the very kind of, where they were kind of like channeling the Kinks a little bit with You Really Got Me and that sound and My Generation. Yeah. And so that was a period of the Who I didn't really learn through you because you had the epics, right? Tommy, Who's Next, Quad, by numbers. But the pre-Tommy Who was something later that I kind of dived into to learn who the Who Sell Out and things like that, and a quick one in My Generation, which wasn't really a part of your immediate attraction to what Who was, obviously. Yeah. Then you had Meaty Beady Big and Bouncy, which got I Can't Explain, and Pictures of Lily, and I Can See for Miles, and He Went Anywhere, Anyhow, all the the Seeker, right? Substitute, all on one thing, and for if you weren't really into those albums, which were really uniquely, shall I say, British, especially a quick one. Certainly, the Who Sell Out, which was so pop art, radio, pirate radio, very geared towards a UK audience, which probably didn't really do too well in America. So it's not surprising that an album like Meaty Beady Big and Bouncy was pretty popular with American Who fans because it took all their big hits and just threw it on one album like we had in the house.
Yeah, and then Who Are You? Which, I was already a fan, and then that came out, and I was excited. They were going to go on tour. I saw them in '79 before Moon passed. Like, we knew they were coming, and we were going to get tickets, When Moon passed, there was a delay, and it was very disappointing because, at that point in my life, Moon was, like epic to me.
Oh, well, right. I mean, you're an aspiring drummer. You're listening to a guy like Moon, and you're like, man, I want to just drum like him. And I remember you telling me stories how you would You would drum. You would drum to the album, wouldn't you?
We had the box. We still had the box, and I was able to put an amplifier plug in through it, and I actually got my buddy Haji
Oh,
borrowed his amp because he never exactly rest his soul.
yep.
He wanted to play guitar, but he never played it. So I borrowed his amp for like 4 years, and it plug it in, and I'd go, and I mean the whole neighborhood knew I played, and I'd put on a record and I'd play along to it, and it was loud, so I was able to play without headphones and play along to The Who, Led Zeppelin, Yes, whatever album we had in the house, a record, I'd play.
Right.
And it was a good practice.
Really good practice to try to keep in time with these legends and these epic drummers like Keith Moon and Bill Bruford and Alan White and all and John Bonham. I mean, come on, these are legends.
I got some of my style, a mix of it. I picked up a little bit of all of them, I believe, in my playing. And then years later, when I really became a serious drummer, Al Jackson Jr. That was with the Stax Records stuff.
Yep.
And that's when I've refined and honed in on my skills.
I seem to remember you taking more of like with the R&B and the Stax and the Motown stuff, and those drummers really. I remember, especially there in the early to mid '90s, you really being influenced by those drummers at that time, like all those guys.
Yeah, no. When we started playing more, and when I hooked up with Memphis Strain, I mean, we were doing that. I was with, I mean, such talented guys. All of them were. I looked at them and I'm like, these, they're better than me, And I always learned you always play with better people, even like sports. To play with better people, you'll be better. And I had these guys that were fantastic musicians. I mean, Juilliard. Jimmy was a trumpet player. He was a Juilliard trumpet player. He played with Elvis on one of his last tours. We had saxophones, alto, tenor, Jack. Just unassuming, fantastic guitar player.
So your career as somebody who just kind of was playing around with the drums as a kid in like the late '70s, early '80s. In the '80s, really kind of then took a trajectory of really I want to become professional. And you were in a myriad of bands, and you were gigging in New York, and you played at the bitter end, and you really kind of became a really you were like really gigging and I mean working, but also hustling as a drummer for a long time, right?
Yeah. At one point it was like every weekend, and at one point I was in a few bands, and it was a couple of gigs a weekend, when I played with Anthem for a year and a half. It was a toll. Playing one gig here, another gig there, and they were straight up that era's rock and roll, U2 and Nirvana and Pearl Jam, that kind of stuff they played, and it was fun. And I literally I just read an article too on this John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin. He's a multi-talented musician. He was a good bass player, but he never knew the names of the songs, right? You'd have to tell him the key and the chord structure, and he goes, "Oh, that one." And that's how it was in Anthem. Like I would say, "How's that one go again?" And they would mouth it to me. I'm like, "Oh, okay, I got it."
So it's really interesting to see somebody that was really kind of just trying out drums to just kind of test the waters, getting into it, being a fan, and then really saying, "Hey, this is what I want to do." And you did it for many, 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 many years.
Yeah, I mean, I still call myself a drummer. Matter of fact, you could turn this.
Are they set up still? Where's those electronic drums? I know they're in there.
Let's see.
Hold on.
I get that around.
Oh, there they are. Is that the same set that you've had for decades?
1987, I bought that set.
I remember seeing those drums downstairs in the basement for years. You got them.
I got them. I had Jimmy Sturgis, right? Jimmy. Right?
Sure.
Great musician in his own right.
Yep.
Played with him, singer, drummer, guitar player. I remember talking about wanting to get a new drum set, and he said, "Don't you dare sell those damn drums. You better keep them," because he loved the sound. And they actually got it for a cheap Pearl export kit. They got a nice sound out of them. They had a nice round sound.
Hmm.
And I never got rid of them. So they're a decoration. Lynette wants them there. As part of. I toy with the idea of setting them up. I just don't know how much noise it's going to be.
Well, a certain nephew of yours gigs every once in a while, not too far from you. You could do it again.
I do see him gigging every once in a while.
Right. So if he was ever doing a solo gig and he needed a drummer, why not go help him out?
Yeah, he's got a very busy schedule too.
Just a bit. But yeah.
If you want to come and be my roadie and carry those drums in and out of the car and set them up for me, I'll play them.
20 years ago, I would have done that for you. And I can remember many a night, well, mate, I wasn't up, but I remember you would be coming in at 4 o'clock in the morning from a gig, and I'd be sleeping over, and you're getting in, you're doing the gig, and then you got to bring everything in at 4 or 5 in the morning, and you're shot. You're shot.
Yeah, it's the one downside about being the drummer. I was a gun for hire for a gig, and I had to do this gig in Jersey, and I went with all my equipment. I had to load it in, load it out by myself, and let me tell you, it wasn't fun. Because you don't have the rest of the band there to do it. When I was in bands, we'd all share in unloading the van.
Right, load and unload. Right.
Taking. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't carry that with me now. I'd bring the electronic set.
Yes.
And I always had a scaled down set. Very early on when I was gigging, I'm like, you know what? I don't need that other tom. I'm just going to play with the one tom and the four tom. That was it. I had a very nice simple setup.
Easy to maintain and easy to carry in and out. I mean, you still have the electronic ones though, right? That hook up to the computer.
I do. They're packed in the garage though. I don't have that much room.
No,
I mean, I have a lot of room, but I don't.
That's a lot of fun. That one's cool because it's just all electronic, and I remember wailing away on that too.
I've got that so I could rehearse and practice when I was living in apartments, and I couldn't make the noise.
So
when I was in the house, I could do whatever I want. I was going to complain. The 10 o'clock, I didn't play past 10 o'clock, so no one could say anything.
Right.
But when I started, I moved out and I had apartments, so I had to go electronic.
Electronic, yeah. Awesome stuff. Jumping back to Quadrophenia a little bit. Your initial impressions of the album in comparison to, obviously you knew Who's Next. I mean, we talk about Quadrophenia, the album, what it represents, what it is. I think it's a universal message on that album. It's teenage angst. Everybody goes through it. A lot of people go through that, and that's probably why it resonated with you. Give me some of your initial reactions to the music, the lyrics, the messages, everything about that record.
I mean, it's in my head now. Is it in my head, right?
Right.
It's just, I love the way he produced it and pieced it together. It's just the running of the songs in between, the rain falling, to piece the songs together, things like that. It's powerful chord structures, vocals, everything was so, it's like there, and it was angry, just, going through this, you go through as a kid, and it just connected with me, and I was like, this is me. I mean, my generation. Hope I die before I get old. I mean, at the time back then, I didn't think I'd make it to 30. I'm long past that now. But that's what you think when you're that young.
When you're that young,
you go through, the way you grow up. Some of us, not all of us grow up like that.
I know one of the lyrics that you often cited whenever we were listening to this record was from Dr. Jimmy. Laugh and say I'm green. I've seen things you've never seen. I know that's probably one that really resonated with you, right?
Yeah. The other one, I'm trying to think, it's Townshend's vocal.
Oh, Punk and the Godfather?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to be careful not to preach. I can't pretend that I can teach, and yet I lived your future out by pounding stages like a circus clown. Yeah, and on the dance floor, broken glass. All of that. all that. So if you're
Great,
watching
great,
this,
great
what?
lyrics.
Oh yeah.
Lyrics are
If you're a novice watcher to this channel and you don't know this album, Quadrophenia is an album that is all entirely written by Pete Townshend of the Who, as everything was, and it's a concept album, right? It's like an opera. It's the Who's second really big magnum opus after Tommy, right? Even though Who's Next was incredible, and it's about a kid who has, who's going basically through like a multiple personality disorder, right? One minute he feels this way, the next minute he feels this way, the next minute he feels this way, and all those themes are represented in the music on the album. I mean, and you have to really dig into it as you have in the decades in front of it. I mean, that's what you hear in all this music, and I think that's why it resonates with so many people, because they were like, "Hey, I feel like that."
Mhm.
100%.
Absolutely.
Um,
He probably knew it, but when he wrote it, how old was he when he wrote it?
Pete
70,
Townsend wasn't even 30 in 1973. He was 28.
right? And he did write everything. I don't know if people know that Pete Townsend wrote
Everything.
all the music. I mean,
Well, you listen to the demos, which you've heard in the decades since. What's astonishing is to hear how complete his versions are, where he just said to the Who, "Make it sound like this, but better." Wasn't that amazing?
Scoops is amazing. I mean, there's some songs that he did on there that I like better than what that he put out. With the band. I mean, it was just the rawness of it is fantastic.
Yeah. When you first started hearing those Townsend demos, you hear a demo, you think, okay, it's like basic, right? No, these demos by Pete, even going back to Tommy, they're fully thought out. Drums, piano, bass, they're completely thought out.
He's doing it since Pictures of Lily.
Yeah.
Which was one of his earliest, right? I think that might be one of his earliest songs, right?
Well, Six Pictures of Lily is like in '67, but it's an early song.
His earliest one. He got his brothers to help him come in.
And you can hear his brother on the track,
right,
on the demo track.
Now his brother's playing with him. Well,
right. So with Quadrophenia, you've got four themes on the album, representing, Jimmy, who's the main character in the story, right? So the main story is Jimmy, right? Jimmy's the guy featured on the album cover, right? And, the four personalities that he's going through are represented by the four members of the Who. So Pete takes on a persona, Roger takes on a persona, Keith Moon takes on a persona, and so does John Entwistle. So all those individual guys are represented in themes on the album. It's really incredible when you think about all of that and what they are and what they mean to the music in it. One of the things I wanted to ask you was, as somebody who listened to it back in the day, it's a very British record. You've got a lot of British slang, a lot of British vernacular on this record. Mods, rockers, zoot suits, GS scooters. As an American, what did that mean to you? Or did you not care because the music was so good?
I don't know if it was kind of a universal thing. I mean, at the time, I wasn't dissecting. I made it. You under the assumption mods, rockers did rival gangs, right? Because they say it, two rival gangs. So you know that you read about it, but suits and all that other stuff, and wide jackets with side vents, and it's a style. I wasn't looking at it and saying, "Oh my God, what the hell are they talking about?" I'm just, it's guys out,
guys out.
The whole angst trying to meet women, meet girls. Are you dressed right? Lady says that. Do I fit the part, or all I need to do is look the part? It doesn't matter who I am inside, right? You just
dress right for a beach fight, but I just can't explain.
Right. It's really, everything that you go through as a kid, it's in there.
Right.
And I don't even know if you know it when you're going through it. It kind of resonates in you. As you get older, we're dissecting it. You see that, everything that you go through growing up. You know, just do I fit in? Does she like me? Does she not like me? Is she gonna? How do I? Do I look right when I go out? Am I dressed right for the club?
Right. I'm
All
on
those
my
things.
parents. My parents are on my ass again. That kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, I think that's universal, right?
Yeah, one of the best lyrics in the whole record, and I think you'll agree with me, is from the Dirty Jobs. My karma tells me you've been screwed again. If you let them do it to you, you've got yourself to blame. Come on.
Yeah, I think I've said that to you, right?
Yeah.
You got yourself. Listen, it's all your responsibility.
If you let them do it to you, you've got yourself to blame. So there's so much wisdom in Townshend's lyrics in this record, and it kind of gets lost. I'd like to think it doesn't get lost now because it's been appreciated. It's been out for 50 years, and he does consider it their best album. If you asked him today, he'll say Quadrophenia is our best record, not Tommy, not Who's Next.
That's good to know. I think so. He and Pete think alike.
He does. So off the top of your head, what are some of the tracks that stand out to you that you're like, wow? I mean, obviously you love the whole record. It's not a record that, I mean, okay, 515 was a single. Love Rain on Me is a single. But it's not a record where you're going to put on satellite radio and hear Cut My Hair or Helpless Dancer or Is It in My Head? It's an album you have to kind of listen to almost in one session, right? When you're listening to it.
I got to get the titles up because then again, remember I said I remember the name of the songs.
Yeah, but once you hear them, once you see them, you'll know them. Like I'm One. Where's your CD copy, Unc?
No, I don't even have a CD anymore.
I know.
Listen, I'm One is a great song. I mean, I look at all of these, and every one of these songs are great. Real Me, Punk Weeks the Godfather was, just the
Well, we quoted that lyric before, yeah.
The running bass line that he does,
Yeah, he did all that. He just said, "And whistle, you do it better."
One's great.
Is It in My Head?
Is It in My Head? Drowned, all of them. Had Enough. Cut My Hair. Helpless Dancer. The lyrics in Helpless Dancer. How cutting edge was that at
Right.
the time in '73 when he was singing that, right? When he wrote that.
Right.
I mean, there was no hiding it. He put it right out there.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. It's 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Those are some lyrics that are in your face lyrics when you listen to them.
And it's just that's what's great about it. It's just right there. And like I look at this and I go down. It's like one after the other after the other. It doesn't stop.
No, sea and sand, right? Here by the sea and sand, nothing ever goes as planned. I just couldn't face going home. It was such a drag on my own.
Yep.
They finally threw me out. My mom got drunk on stout. My dad couldn't stand on 2 feet as he lectured about morality. These are themes. These are universal things that people go through.
The hypocrisy, right? That's what kids think. They don't. And today, when you're older, you look back. All right, he's telling me, even though he's not abiding by what he's saying. He's trying to tell me for my own good, so I don't end up like him. But when you're a kid, you hear that. I'm like, you're not doing what you're telling me to do.
Right.
These are all things we all go through.
100%. What did you like about the album linking it? I mean, yes, it's like Tommy where it's a theme, but so many of the themes are repeated throughout the whole album, that bring it together as a concept.
Well, that's why, because it's not all over the place. It's like a week in the life or a day in the life, right, of these guys, right? Like in the neighborhood,
Right.
Going down to the beach, getting up in the morning. My Friday makes me sick first thing in the morning. And it's like being in the neighborhood. The radio's on in the background, and the teapots whistling, and
Right. You're hearing everyday life in this music. You're hearing the
Yeah,
TV or the teapot whistling. You're going the everyday life that you're hearing in the music is again, which is why Townsend was able to construct such a masterpiece with this record to do
yeah.
it. I mean,
No, he's a genius. I mean, when it comes down to it, he's one of those guys. There's not that many of these people that have written like he's written. I mean, your other show, obviously, it's those guys, right? And then a lot of the ones you picked on, and this are those, right? You talk about the Who, you talk about Yes, you talk about these are fantastic writers.
yeah,
Elton John and Bernie, right?
right. Listen, I've often said if I had to make a Mount Rushmore of musicians, here's my Mount Rushmore. Okay, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Pete Townshend, Bob Dylan, and Peter Gabriel.
Yeah, Bob Dylan, Peter Gabriel.
I mean, that's if I was just to. I know there's so many other people you could put up there, but if you had to just I mean, Townsend and Gabriel were trendsetters. I mean, I know they're a little bit later, but I mean, they motivated and were so original and so inspirational what they did. Townsend belongs in the discussion.
Yeah, he's there for me. Listen, Lennon, McCartney, there's no touching them, and they open the door for everybody. They literally wrote their own songs because they didn't want to play the same songs the other band was playing.
Right.
And they're like, well, we could write them, and they don't even know that, a lot of the artists they listen to, black artists, were writing their own songs because no one would write for them.
No.
So they had to write their own songs, and they didn't know that when they were doing it. They covered them, like they covered a bunch of them, very well, mind you. But they opened the door for everything else to come. And I don't think that gets talked about enough.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But Townsend took it to another direction, with what his writing was in there as well.
Yeah. And it's just, I mean, you talk about these guys. I mean, it's amazing how all of these, it's the boiling pot of music that we listen to all came from this one area. It's like, well, what was in the water back then. In
a country compared to America that's about the size of a postage stamp. When you think about it, right, England compared to the United States of America, it's a postage stamp. And look at all the wealth of talent that came out of there. It's crazy.
It's ridiculous. It must be the tea. It must be something because, I mean, it's our top, right? My top bands. I mean, the Rolling Stones. I mean, leave them off the list. They would, they took, rock and roll blues to a whole
other level.
And even Keith's writing,
Yeah.
Just in Led Zeppelin, if you're, that direction. I mean, Jimmy's writing, musically too, they were friggin' incredible. But they're all from there.
All from there.
And I mean, I don't know what towns, but I mean, it's Moody Blues,
Birmingham.
Beaches.
Yep.
The Pink Floyd, they all hung out together.
All of them.
In late 60s, we were going to the same clubs together, right?
All
it's amazing what happened in that little period of time. It's just like an explosion.
Of an embarrassment of riches. It really was.
Well, to our benefit, right?
Thank God for that. I want you to tell everybody out there about a funny story about your introduction to me with this record. Way back in the day, circa 1995-ish. Please tell everybody about this.
What were you listening to? You were listening to something over and over again.
Only the Beatles and Paul.
Beatles.
That was it. That was all I was listening to.
And
so I remember this as clear as day still.
Listen, I had the same thing with his father. Because I was listening to the Beatles all the time. Because, why not? They're great. But, after a while, put another record on,
Right.
Try something else. And that's what he was doing to me. And I'm like, oh, how do I get him? I got to get him to listen to something else. And I really had to cajole him and say, hey, there is other music out there. And I said, why don't you try this? Listen to this. Just listen to it for a little bit. And to my surprise and happiness, he did. And that opened up a wealth of knowledge for him and unending musical path for you, right? Because you really made it a living at this point. This is you live for this.
Well, yeah, but I owe it all to you because I wouldn't be where I am right now without you saying try this, and that opened up the floodgates musically to me. Okay, there's that band and there's this band, and then even taking a deeper dive into Yes, which I give you credit for. You don't take it, but I give it to you because you're like, you did that on your own.
Yeah, I appreciate it, but no, you did, and then we went to some shows. I saw.
Well, that was going to be my next segue, but go ahead.
So I saw them in '79.
Right. So you saw the Who in 1979, right after Keith Moon passed. The first tour with Kenny Jones. Yeah.
Right, and it wasn't disappointing because I was seeing the Who, and I just wanted to see them, and literally they were loud. I was at the Garden. And I had a laser show. It was minimal show, but it was so loud. I mean, it was amazing, and I couldn't tell you what the hell they played. I really couldn't tell you.
A lot of Who Are You, actually, believe it or not.
Yeah, but I mean, you probably could pull up the set list.
Yeah,
surprise me. But I'm pretty sure it was in August of '79, and then they actually came back around. It was talk about them retiring.
Farewell tour. You mean because you went to the show at Shea in '82 with the Clash?
Right. Because Keith Moon's hearing, because of the
no,
sound.
not Keith. Pete's.
Pete Townshend's hearing. So yes, then Shea Stadium, the Clash, David Johansen, right? We a bunch of us went to the show. Some friends. And we actually got on the field because we knew one of the security guys.
Oh, you did.
That worked at Shea, and we went down and we were on the field, and then I saw him again in '89.
That was the 20 years of Tommy, right?
But it wasn't. It was out of the shows I saw, that was my least favorite.
Right, because it was very glitzy. It was very showy. It wasn't a rock concert. It was very.
It was. I saw them outside at Giant Stadium. I was all the way up.
Giant Stadium, folks. The true name for it, isn't that right?
It was called Giant Stadium then,
and it still should be.
Yeah, true. That's another show.
That's another show. But yeah, go ahead.
I'll come on that one too. Yeah, and I was with Kathy, and it was people. We're up high. People, getting up, standing up, and they were on you. And I was curmudgeon-y then. I was very salty at shows at that point, and we were going to a lot of shows because she worked for Atlantic Records.
And you saw a lot of shows then. Yeah.
And it just started getting tiresome. I mean, watch the show. People were enjoying the show. And then, who had done for me, especially when Edgeworth's passed.
Yeah.
What are they still doing? Zeppelin, they cut it, once Bonham died.
Yep, that was it. Another band you just missed out on seeing too, I might add, to tell our viewers.
Yes. And
you had tickets, did you not?
No, I never had tickets. It was prior to me. My first show that I saw was '77. Though it was Queen.
Right.
Queen. So and then the next year was Yes.
Yes, right.
So I also missing out on knowing, being in the know, that came a couple of years later when I knew every show that was coming. You had to know the right people. It wasn't like you had a computer to look it up.
No.
Yeah. So what was I saying about?
You saw them in '89, and you were kind of done with going to see the Who as a band.
Yeah,
Then
you want to, let's go, and I kept telling you, I don't want to go see them. I mean, it's like, what am I going to see? Although they did fill the bass player role with a very prominent bass player. Right?
They did.
But then,
And now, if I may just say real quick, I think you'll agree. I think when you saw the Who perform at the concert for New York City after 9/11, they absolutely stole the show. Even though Paul was the headliner and Paul closed it, the Who fucking stole that show. They owned that night.
Right.
And I think that might have been the point where you were like, hey, maybe they still got a little bit,
No, I want to tell you, literally, and I actually called you. I was sitting home, I was flipping through the stations, TV, and Palladia channel was on. And I stopped because I see this Keith Moon. He had a kufi on, and he's playing, and it's not Keith Moon, Pete Townshend. And he's playing, and he's doing his wonderful riffs, and they sound good, And I'm like, I look in, I said, who's the bass player? Palladino.
Pino at that time it was Pino Palladino, yes, who was a really really good seasoned touring bassist, yeah.
Bass playing's good, but the thing that really caught me was the drummer.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, listen, Kenny Jones was a professional drummer. He played for years on bands, but
he just wasn't the right drummer for the Who, which was Roger's thing to begin with.
Go back to the Faces. That's where he belonged. He did belong in the Who. But I'm watching this drummer, and I'm like, damn, he's good, and he's got the Who sound. He's got the feel. He's not Keith Moon, but he's not trying to be Keith Moon. He's being himself, but he's also doing the rolls and stuff and the fills that Keith Moon has done. The flavor of the song. So I call Andy up. I'm like, I'm watching Palladia. I said, I'm like, who's the drummer? And he tells me it's Zach Starkey, and I'm like, what? And I'm like, yeah, he's been the drummer for since 19 whatever. I'm like, get out of here. And I'm like, holy shit.
Since 96.
I didn't know that he was that good. I didn't know. And I didn't know he was playing with the Who. So when
Ringo's son out there, for those of you who don't know, it was Ringo's son who became the prominent drummer and still the drummer for the Who today.
Phenomenal drummer, by the way. And then when the Quadrophenia tour was coming around, I said, I'll go to this one. I'll definitely go to this. So we went. We went to see. I actually saw it twice. I saw it with Andy in Barclays Center, and I saw it at Madison Square Garden. Through work, we had a suite.
Oh, did you go again a few nights later, or before that?
We had a suite at work.
Where was my phone call?
Company. I couldn't bring anybody.
I'm kidding.
I was lucky. No, but I would have called you. I was lucky. I hitched on and I just kept quiet.
Oh, so we went. That was in 2012, and we went and saw them do all of Quadrophenia, start to finish. Now, a little backstory: the Who did perform Quadrophenia live in 1996, really at the height of when I was really starting to get into them, big time. After you introduced me to the album. But it was a different show, and I was 15 at the time. I didn't have the money to go. You really weren't. You weren't at that time. You were like, I'm done with the Who. I saw them already. You didn't know that was a new drummer yet. But it was a different kind of show. They did Quadrophenia, but they brought in the guy that played Jimmy in the movie, and they had spoken bits of dialogue, and they did a show at Madison Square Garden in 1996. They did the whole album. But they brought Jimmy in, the guy, because obviously, if you don't know, Quadrophenia was a movie later on in 79. Mm-hmm. They brought Phil Daniels in, who was the actor, to do the dialogue in between the songs. And Roger always felt that did not translate well to an audience. Like, we're a rock concert, play the album, right? So that tour did not really go over well, even though they did it. And I remember thinking, damn, I would love to say, I've just discovered this new band, this album, I want to go see them, but it didn't happen. Thankfully, 15 years later or so, they did it, but they did it Roger's way, and they just played the album, which is what we saw. Start to finish, no story, just the music. And obviously, Entwistle's gone, but they did tributes to John Entwistle and Keith Moon by playing with them on the video screen during. Remember that?
That was great. They did that. Yeah.
They did 5:15, which had a really long bass solo part, which featured John Entwistle playing bass on the video screen with the live band in-house playing along with him. And then, of course, they did Bellboy with Keith Moon singing it, which was absolutely amazing to see the current Who band playing with Keith Moon on a video screen. I mean, that was so. Did that?
Really good.
So seeing that show, then you were like, "Wow, I got to see this album start to finish," and what you were like, "This is great."
It was great. You were with me. We were singing along with Roger the whole time. Every friggin' word, and we even corrected him on the words he sang wrong.
That's right. That's right. We were. I didn't realize you went to go see it a few nights later at the Garden. That part I did not know about.
I was lucky enough to go see them. We had the suite, and the man. I talked to the manager. I said, "Listen, you got to get me into this thing. I'm a big Who fan. You got to let me go."
Can you let me in, please? So you watched that from a suite in the Garden.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So they probably did it. You know, Roger probably told Pete, "I'm going to kick your ass if you try to do that talking bullshit again."
And if you read Pete's biography and Roger's, they both talk about it, saying like it was horrible, you know. And they're both very frank people. They'll tell you what they mean. You know, Roger we know is the one who would kick ass. You know, Pete's an art guy. You know, but Roger is the one who would knock somebody out.
Well, he's kicked Pete's ass a few times.
He has.
Yes.
He has.
But it's been written about.
Yeah, but no more of this like kind of artsy fartsy stuff. He goes, "We're a rock and roll band. Let's do it." And he really is the one that has kept the driving spirit of the Who going. And they're touring right now to this day. You know, they're just about they're not quite 80 yet. You know, they're getting there and they're still going. But kudos to them. You know, I know they're going to probably call it a day soon. But Zach Starkey is still there. Yeah, he's still their drummer.
Yeah, Rogers. Well, he's young, right? What is he? He's in his 50s? Or is he 60?
Zach Starkey is probably in his, I would say, late 50s.
Yeah, because Ringo, they have 4 kids, right?
Ringo and Maureen? Well, no, yeah, 3 kids, I think.
3? Yeah, he had another. He has a girl and a couple of sons, right?
Yes, he does. Lee, Zach, and Jason.
Right.
Oh, the 3. I think he has 3 kids. Yeah. And they were all born at the height of Beatlemania, right? So, or shortly thereafter. So, yeah, I would say I think Zach was born in about 65 or 66. So he's a little bit. This is maybe he's right in your age range, really.
Yeah, I'll be 59 at the end of the year.
Right. So he's a spring chicken compared to Pete and Roger, and he's still doing it. So,
Roger's in good shape. You know, he always kept himself in very good shape, physically. He does the tours, the cruise concerts.
Yes.
Out of Florida, you know, his own band. You know.
Right. Roger Ultra, and he'll do all of Tommy with his own band,
right.
Which he's done. But it was, you know, to be able to see that record performed live, you know, how many years, 40 years after you first heard it, done well, years after you thought you were done seeing them as a live act, and the fact that I got to see them with you, that's a top concert moment in all time.
What are we looking at? We're looking at 23 years later, from 89, right, to 2012.
Right, where you had not seen them at all.
Yeah, I was done. With them. You know, and I tell you, I'm done with a lot of concerts. You know, at this point, I want to see somebody I haven't seen before. You know?
Right.
I got to see Paul.
We checked that box, baby, at Yankee Stadium. Yes, we did in 2011. I had to drag you there, but I'm like, well, you did.
The new stadium. No, I was happy to go. I was happy with the show because you know he played the stuff I like. You know,
he opened up with the night before.
Right. Yeah. I got to see Clapton, which was good.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else left on your bucket list?
Not really. I mean, there's some bands I haven't seen, but I don't have to. You know.
You're at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I got a buddy of mine. He goes up to Bethel Woods all the time. He all the time says, you know, going to the show, come to the show. And
yeah.
I don't want to do it. You know,
I got to be honest with you. I'm getting up or near my age, and unless it's a certain band or it's a smaller venue, I'm
small
not going
venues are
either.
cool.
Smaller
I'll
venue,
see-
amateur night at MetLife Stadium, whatever, Giant Stadium. I'm done. I think you would agree.
I'm happy to go to the local bar and see Tom or some other guy play. You
I
know,
think that's nickels and dimes for you. That's folks. That's a little plug. Go check them out. They're a Jersey
yeah,
Shore band. Go check them out.
my
Good
friend,
musician.
I'd like to get to see my friend Jimmy and Eddie. Anthem. They play unplugged. They play acoustic. They play the full band. Problem is, they play in Rockaway. Rockaway's a hike for me now.
Yes, it. Yes, it is.
It's like and he knows it. And I'm like, I'd love to come see you guys. Sometimes
Where do they play in Rockaway? In that little cabana type club tiki bar thing out there that Robert played at.
They'll play the Sugar Bowl. They'll play the Seagull, whatever it's
That's
called.
the one I'm talking about. Yeah.
They'll play Kennedy's. There's a Rockaway hotel they play.
Yeah.
I mean, you follow them, right? So
yeah.
So you see where they're playing.
Yeah,
but sometimes they'll play up lower New York, right on the border.
Right.
There's a couple of places over there they play, which I'd like to try to get. It's the timing,
Of course, like everything. So awesome. Well, thank you very much for your memories and your history and how you got into music and your stories about being a drummer. I think I have lots of great memories. I've seen you play a couple times in your heyday, but I've got the recordings, and then to see somebody who did it, I'll get to it. To see somebody, they're sitting right up there. See, they're there. They're there. I got them. They're up there. I got them. They ain't going anywhere.
Well, my fiance wants to hear me play.
Listen, I'll get to it. Okay. Listen. Rome wasn't built in a day.
True.
I'll get to it. Uncle Scott, I'd like to thank you for your memories of your, everything that you kind of went through coming up to getting into the drums, getting into the music, your memories with the Who. I'd like to thank you a lot for exposing me to the music and the album, because I wouldn't be sitting here if you didn't do that. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
It opened up a floodgate, and for me to do what I can now do as a hobby, and I really enjoy it, and can reach people with that message of music which you gave to me. So thank you so much.
No, great what you're doing. Keep it going. I like it.
Thanks, man.
You're getting the word out.
Thanks, man. So that's going to wrap it up for this installment of Andy's Music Vault. Again, the album is Quadrophenia. If you don't know it, add it to your music list and listen to it. It is a deep dive. I've often said if you really want to discover who Andy Nicholes is, you'll listen to this album start to finish, and you'll get a little bit of an idea.
It's a must listen.
Absolutely must listen, and I learned from the best right there. So, Scott Nicholes, thank you very much, and we'll see everybody again next time on the next installment of Andy's Music Vault, The Other Leg. See you next time. Bye-bye.